This episode is brought to you by Moo, the place to get delightfully premium business cards, postcards, mini cards, flyers, stickers, greeting cards, and so much more. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. This is the place where we expose the threads of heroism that stitch together the stories we admire most. As a musician, singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and business owner, I encounter some really fascinating stories. Every episode you'll hear features a revealing conversation with someone who courageously pours themselves out into the world. We'll talk about fears befriended, the terrors battled, and the courage created along our stories of bravery, quiet heroism, and all-out gutsiness. We open the Pandora's box of the dream-crushing constraints we all face during significant moments of bravery. These moments of bare naked bravery are rarely censored in real life, so if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. The questions I ask today aren't scripted because I'm just curious. What is bravery? My hope for us all is that by listening to others search for and find their bravery, we will find our own. For that is what we need most, to know that we are not alone. The best way you can support the show is to share it with a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle's Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Bottom line, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. In today's episode, we talk with Zach Varnell, who's been recording since he was 13 years old. I have had the joy and pleasure of working with Zach in some previous music projects, and he has worked with everything from a 2-track reel-to-reel in his parents' basement in Denver to places like London Bridge and Bear Creek Studios in Seattle, Washington. My personal favorite studio is a 19th century English mansion in Renton, Washington, owned by Howard Leese, the guitarist from the band Heart and Bad Company. Zach and 2 other friends transformed this gorgeous place into a destination boutique studio appropriately called The Castle. And he's worked with bands like Pink Martini, Brandi, Carlile, Damien, Jurado, Pickwick, Alan Stone, John Vanderslice, The Head and the Heart, and Drew Grow. In 2013, Zach helped start the company Lively, a music technology company recording live concerts, and he became the VP of audio engineering and show production there. Zach then joined CreativeLive as the head of curriculum for their music and audio channel. And all of that is fascinating, but today we get to talk about something brand new. Zach is a part of a team of heroes who are starting a high school, and not just any high school. It might be the coolest public high school I've ever heard of, and that says a lot because Tacoma, Washington, where I currently live, already has my beloved Tacoma School of the Arts. In 2016, Zach got back into education as the co-director of this brand new innovative public high school called IDEA. IDEA is an acronym representing the school's innovative curriculum, which centers around industrial design, engineering, and the arts. When we've got big dreams, taking the next step towards that dream can be anything but easy. However, Zach's experience in the music industry and in education has built a strength in him, and therefore his students too. He's really great at breaking down big ideas into small, tangible steps. So, Zach, what is this high school? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so this high school is called IDEA. It's actually the 3rd school that we've opened in Tacoma that are part of what we call partner schools. So in 2001, we opened the School of the Arts in downtown Tacoma. Kind of the vision was to create an arts-focused high school that centered around the visual and performing arts and embed it within the city, to have access to the resources like the Museum District, the Performing Arts District, the University of Washington, Tacoma, and all the businesses that kind of exist in downtown core. In 2009, we opened the 2nd school, the Science and Math Institute. And in kind of a similar fashion, instead of using the downtown area for an art school, we opened a life sciences focused high school out at Point Defiance Park. So it's embedded within the park and uses the resources of the zoo and the marina, 5 Mile Drive. It's actually the second largest city park in the United States, and we have it right here in the city. So Sammy was sort of centered around building a school with that environment and using those resources. So this school idea is the similar model. We're opening a school that centers around industrial design, engineering, and the arts. And we want to study things like, architecture, engineering, robotics, computer science. We basically talk about our kids as tinkerers, kids that love to take things apart, put them back together, and figure out how they can design different objects, whether it's in spatial design or, put together different projects. What makes IDEA unique is that instead of embedding a school within a community and using the resources that are available within that community, we're actually inviting the community into the school. What we've put together, it's exciting. It's basically an opportunity for businesses to come into the building and share space with us. So we've put together a process to identify some businesses to work with us. And basically in exchange for free rent within the building, we have a 45,000 square foot building here on the south side of Tacoma. We're offering them free space in the building in exchange for contact hours with students to work either as interns or to teach a class, run an after school program, that kind of thing.
So let's go back. So there are 3 schools, each with their own acronym for a name. SODA is the arts one. SAMI is the math and science. And IDEA stands for what?
Industrial design, engineering, and the arts.
Cool. Okay. And you were part of starting all 3, is this correct?
I started teaching at the School of the Arts in 2004. So I taught there for about 10 years, first as an adjunct instructor, then later as a full-time teacher. And then in the last couple of years after I finished my master's in education administration, moved into working with the leadership team before I left to do some other projects outside of education.
What was it like to start SODA or be part of that?
I came in on year 4 of SODA, so I wasn't there for the first years.
But that's still pretty new.
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting to see an organization like that grow and change over time. Being the first school that we had, we're still figuring out a lot of the ways in which we would operate. And as you kind of grow up when you first start, you have a lot of ideas that you try and then you learn what works and what doesn't. And then over time.
What was something that really didn't work?
Early on, we had my first year when I was teaching, we had something called Open Studio on Friday afternoons where the idea was we would just have all the studios open and students could just come for 3 hours and work on projects. And it was a really sort of unfocused time. And I think it only lasted a couple of years before we realized that without more structure and guided intent, it was just sort of a waste of time and most students didn't really take it seriously.
Yeah. I mean, how has that philosophy, I fully believe that creativity needs structure and needs boundaries and constraints in order for it to really thrive.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise it just like nebulizes into nothing.
Right, exactly.
So is that something that you're taking into this new school IDEA?
Yeah, very intentionally. I mean, one thing that we're doing with IDEA that we didn't really intentionally do with the start of the other 2 schools is centering the schedule and the curriculum around project-based learning. So in the first year, for example, we have 8 teachers, 8 full-time teachers, and each of them are on a team of 4, a project team of 4 teachers. Each project team has an arts teacher, a science teacher, a math teacher, and a humanities teacher. And each of those projects, they're basically coming up with projects that have the same final project that extends across all 4 of those disciplines. Each project might have what we call a summative assessment that is similar between all 4, but then each individual class has what we call formative assessments that build up and lead to the end result, which is the same project. So the goal is really this integrated approach to how do these 4 disciplines come together to create something instead of how are they separate? How do we think about them in the way in which they work together to build towards something? And how can we embed the things that we want students to learn within the context of a real world problem that they can actually solve?
What kind of problems are you guys anticipating solving?
So, I mean, some examples that we've talked about, like if we want to study anatomy and physiology, we, could design a chair. Like if we're going to build a chair, we want to study how the human spine works. So in the process of building that chair, we have to study how the spine works, how we can support it. We could study the type of structural support that it would need to have. We could study the type of stain and with chemistry that we're going to use to stain the chair. We could look at the cost of goods. If we were going to make 100 of these chairs, what would the materials cost be? So it's really about like how do we put together one piece, one project that can sort of incorporate all these each of these disciplines.
I don't know if you knew this about me, but I was homeschooled.
Oh, nice.
And Strangely, like most kids who are homeschoolers and graduate as homeschoolers, they start as homeschoolers. And
Right.
in junior high, though, I was in public school. And then in junior high, after 7th grade, I was like, Mom, you have got to get me the hell out of here.
Yeah, middle school's a hard time for sure.
It's awful. But the thing that spurred me on to ask her about this was I read a book about unschooling.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I won't unschool you because that sounds irresponsible.
Right, exactly.
But I will homeschool you. So that's why I love this high school idea, because it's exactly what I wanted in junior high. It's exactly what I think a lot of our education system needs, the real world application of like, and if you're going to build a chair and sell it, how do you pay your taxes?
Right, exactly.
So what are some other, like building a chair? Do you guys have any other projects that you have in mind, or are the students guiding this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can share some other ideas too. One of the really big important sort of components of project-based learning is that it really involves student voice and choice. So they really have a way to not only make decisions about which projects they're doing, but basically scaffold them in ways that they can adapt to what their specific interests are. Another project we looked at, for example, was if we're going to study politics and government, and we wanted students to design an iOS app that would show a map of the United States broken down by a congressional district. And then you could zoom in on each of the districts and see a change over time of party leadership going back and forth between, the two parties. So in that project, you're looking at a large amount of data. So you have to organize and collect data and figure out how to filter it. You've got graphic design and visual design where you're breaking down a map and figuring out how you're going to visually display this information. You have to understand the political system of how congressional districts work. And then you have programming where you're actually working with a computer science teacher to actually design and build this app that works. So you have 4 components that you're learning each of these separate subjects, but they're all embedded within a real world project.
That's great. What about grades?
Yeah, so each project in education, we have what's called formative and summative assessments. So formative assessments are like, they make up usually a smaller percentage of your overall grade, but they're sort of like smaller check-ins along the way. So just like you would do any project, you don't wait until the final result to do any work. You, along the way, sort of like accomplish smaller tasks that build up to the bigger task. So formative assessments are a way that, teachers can be continually collecting information on, are the students actually progressing on this project? Today you have to turn in this, on Friday this is due. And then the major project is going to be done in 6 weeks, but along the way, you have all these check-ins that are showing us to make sure that you're actually progressing on the project and understanding the concepts that are being taught.
That's cool. Who came up with this idea for the school idea?
It was proposed by John Kettler and Kristen, who are the 2 directors of SOTA and SAMI. They presented it to the school board about a year ago this time, and then the school board voted on it in August of last year and voted to open the school.
That's great. And is it public school?
Yeah, it's a Tacoma Public High School.
Wow, that's really great. Now we've got like the overarching, which is still really thrilling. But who are the teachers?
So we've got a pretty incredible group of people. We had a lot of, interest in people that wanted to do education differently from a variety of backgrounds. Some people that have never taught before, some people that are seasoned teachers. We wanted to put together sort of a blend of teachers with a lot of classroom experience and then people who have, accomplished great things outside of education that wanted to start doing what they've done in the world within the context of a school. So we have 8 full-time teachers. Melissa, who taught at SOTA for a long time, she's a seasoned veteran leader on the SOTA staff that's coming over.
What does she teach at?
She teaches
School
humanities.
Of the Arts?
Yeah, she's a humanities teacher.
Oh, cool.
English and social studies. We hired Ben Warner, who founded Alchemy Skateboarding. He's a huge advocate for civic engagement and youth empowerment. He has done just a lot of crazy things in his life. Started his own nonprofit. He's got 2 master's degrees. He longboarded across the United States with 2 kids that had dropped out of high school, and he wanted to help them graduate. So he put together this project where they would longboard across the U.S. So he's done some pretty incredible things in his life, and his big passion is just working with kids and helping them achieve what they want to achieve. He's also probably one of the most well-read people I know. He just reads voraciously. So he's teaching humanities. Peter Rudder, he taught for 10 years. He's an awesome math teacher, taught math in sort of a more traditional system, and then left, started his own guitar pedal company. So he actually fabricates and builds guitar pedals and ships them all over the world. And so he's looking at how can he use electronics to be able to teach math? How can he teach algebra through looking at schematics and studying electricity? Got a great physics teacher. She went to University of Puget Sound. She's a younger teacher, really passionate about teaching physics. Chris Sharp, who is an amazing graphic designer. Both his parents were teachers. He's teaching visual design. Jaleesa, who is taught for the last 2 years at SAMI. She teaches computer science. She's just finishing her master's in human-centered computer design at UW up in Seattle. And Rachel, who's our special ed teacher, she's a rock star. She's awesome working with students. So yeah, we got a really great group of people. I don't think I forgot anyone. I think it's everyone.
Well, I'm sure there will be a lot more people that will join on too. Okay, let's get to you. You are a sound engineer.
Yeah.
A brilliant one. And you've had a lot of experience with that. And you've taught at this arts high school in Tacoma. And now you're a principal. Why did you choose this?
Yeah, so when I got into, I didn't specifically decide to get into education. I wanted to be a producer, wanted to work with bands, worked in studios. I've always loved building and creating things. And when I started teaching, started to see how much more of an impact I could have in the world with working with students every year and then seeing them go off and accomplish these incredible things. So to me, it was so much more rewarding to see them and their careers flourish than to try to focus on my own. So I just spent less and less time on my own career and more time, working with these kids. And as the program started to grow, I was thrilled. I had just so much fun. So I went back to school to get my master's in education administration, just to continue to expand more opportunities and to find ways that we could open more schools like this. And so, yeah, my path into education was kind of a different one, but it was more an opportunity to see how someone who has a passion for a specific skill can start to see how that can mirror different ways of teaching and mirror different ways of empowering people to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So
how has Bravery been a part of your story, that specific facet of your story?
It's a good question. I would say that anyone who decides to get into public education has to be brave. It's a very difficult system on both times. There's huge challenges and worthy work being done, but it's also very, very time consuming and very bang your head against the wall difficult in some ways, especially when you think about doing education differently and approaching each problem differently than they've traditionally been done. So it just requires a lot of bravery to do that. But I think anytime you try to do something new and try to get people on board, it's like you're the captain of the ship and you have to tell people where we're going, and they can't see the island yet, but you've got to convince them that it's there and keep the boat on course and get everyone excited about it, even though they can't see it yet. So the biggest challenge right now is just getting all the students, their parents, the teachers, keeping everyone, continually to vision cast about where we're going and what it's going to look like when we get there.
And how do you do that?
It's just constantly reinforcing what the vision is and what our values are. So our school kind of centers around 4 goals, 4 pillars that are across all 3 schools: empathy, community, balance, and thinking. And so, continuing to drive everything back to those 4 pillars is really important. As we talk about empathy, it's a learning community is about how do we think about not just my own success, but the success of the people around me. And the reality is none of us are going to be successful unless we can figure out how all of us can get there and not just myself. So education doesn't become about me being better than everyone else. It's about us all making sure we can all be successful. And then community, it's really about bringing people in and making them a part of the educational conversation. I think most people, if you ask them, how do you get involved in public education, if they're not a teacher or a parent, they have no idea how to have a part of that. So we're really trying to break down those walls so that students are a part of a community and they see the connection between what they're studying now and people that are doing it in the real world in their lives. So it's really about putting together a community of learners.
So with the empathy and community, how do you, as you're inviting these business owners to come in and share space with your high school, how are you encouraging them to build their empathy or the students' empathy?
Well, there's specific ways in which we're evaluating businesses that want to be a part of it. And we have a rubric we've put together that kind of evaluates them. But one of the big components is their desire to work with kids, that they want to see their business as a tool to be able to teach kids, specific skills or give them opportunities. So really part of that process is seeing who's really interested in not just bringing a cool business and wants free space, but who's passionate about teaching and, providing opportunities for some of those students.
How do you communicate what empathy is to a student?
I don't think you communicate it. I think you have to show it over time. We have, there's a number of ways in which that specific school goal is embedded within everything that we do through our mentor groups, where on Fridays, students are with mentors and they really look at talking about where each one of them are coming from, telling their stories, and then working as like an advisor to say, how are you being successful in school? What are your struggles and what resources do you need to be successful? But then also, I think a big part of it is our special ed program, which one of our big things that makes us different is that we've got a policy of full inclusion for all students. So students that have physical disabilities or learning disabilities, or their student has autism or Down syndrome or is in a wheelchair or even has emotional behavioral issues, that they're embedded within each class and they're not pulled out. And the value of that is not just for the students that are included in every class and given the same opportunities, but that the students that are not part of that special ed program learn how to interact with people that are very different from them and have had a different experience in life and approach problems differently. So it's really about forcing those conversations and having those opportunities there so that students see it's about how do I connect with someone and not about how are they different from me and how do I just find my group, but how do I connect with people that, see things differently.
That's great. So you have empathy, community, and then what's the third one?
There's 4, balance and thinking. So balance is really about, creating a balance across all the disciplines. There's a big push in education to really focus on STEM, on math, science, technology, that focus. And while our school is definitely focused on that, it also needs to be balanced with things like the arts, with the humanities, with being physically fit and understanding how your body works. And I mean, there's, education is about, it's a big picture. It's not just one specific track. So, and then thinking is really our goal that really focuses on, we really want to challenge students to think about big problems. If we're studying history, it's not about memorizing a list of dates that were important. It's about really going deep into one specific situation in history that presented a problem, and they really think deeply about some of those challenges.
Before we get back to the conversation, I want to tell you a little bit more about today's sponsor, Moo Cards. They are the only company I've ever ordered business cards or custom printed paper goods from. In fact, if you've ever attended a concert of mine, then you've probably seen their Luxe business cards on my merchandise table after the show. Every single order I've made from Moo has been so easy and quite honestly, really fun. But I'm a design nerd like that, so even if you're not a design nerd, you can select from some of their expertly designed templates, so you won't look like an idiot while handing somebody your flyer. Oh, and their new line of Luxe paper goods gets an awesome reaction from my fans every single time. So if you've ever wanted someone to say, I get to keep this when you hand them your business card, then you should go to barenakedbravery.com/moo, MOO. When you're working on balance with these students, is it a holistic balance, or talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, balance is across the curriculum. So we just want to focus, here's a good example. So we've had these, what are called first look days, which are once a month. We've invited the freshman class that are coming in the fall to come on campus for 3 hours. And we do small activities, kind of little challenges. They get to know the instructors, their peers. On the very first day, one of our instructors taught them a dance routine, had them all dancing. And so this is a bunch of kids that have chosen to go to an engineering industrial design school, and we're teaching them to dance. And there was a number of phone calls that I got of, this is not what we signed up for. We didn't think we were going to have to dance. And while that's not going to be a huge part of our curriculum, obviously, it was just an opportunity for us to show that education is a big component. There's a lot that is involved. It's not just one specific thing. So,
yeah, that actually touches on a really important part of not only education, but in doing something brave.
Right.
The people around you are scared.
Right. Well, and part of the reason we did that was because 8th graders coming in are, it's one of the first times they're meeting all each other. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, middle school, it's a very challenging time. And, it's really about how you're interacting with your peers. Your brain in those middle school years is really focused on your social interactions. That's the primary focus. And so doing something like a dance breaks down everyone's cool factor into the point where they have to just realize we're all in the same weird boat where we're learning to dance, and it's uncomfortable and awkward, but we're doing it together. And so it kind of helps break down some of those barriers.
I mean, I'm sure their families might even have fear about.
Oh, absolutely. We talk with parents all the time. And a lot of the questions are, the building we're using is an elementary school for almost 100 years that has been vacant for the last, 3 or 4 years. So we're moving in and transforming it, but it's going to take time. And right now it doesn't look pretty. It's not like, when we were doing interviews with some of the students, one student asked, I heard the school was going to be like Google's campus. They're like, well, I don't know where you heard that, but it's maybe in, 10 years. But right now it's just an empty elementary school that we're going to transform. So
is the building itself working its way into the curriculum?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at, one of the first things we did on the first look day was ask the students, here's the floor plans for the building. What would you do if you were to redesign the school? And they had to sit down and sketch out what rooms they wanted, where they would put things. And we took some great ideas from students there that they wanted to incorporate.
What was one of them?
Well, for example, there was a couple students that really wanted to put in a skate park. And so, that's something we're going to work on. We've got an amazing humanities teacher that his background is in skateboarding. And we've been talking to some partners. And over time, the next couple of years, we want to put something like that together and see what we can build.
That's so rad. I think that our country specifically is not very brave when it comes to teaching children how to think.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? Or how do you anticipate being brave in the realm of teaching thought?
Well, that's a really big subject.
I know.
I think a lot of it is we're looking at, it's really being honest about the students where they're at when they're coming in and breaking down. Kind of centering everything around project-based learning. If you've ever, I know you have experience with project management, but the whole idea of project management is taking a very, very large goal and then breaking it down into very specific steps that are accomplishable.
Yeah.
And so in the same way, designing a curriculum in a school is the same thing. At the end of the 4 years through our program, we want our students to look like this and or not look like this, but we want their days to look like this and their projects to look like this, but they're not going to do that on day one. So it's about where do we want them to be and how do we break that down so that on day one, what are we doing on the first day? And what's the first thing you can do? A lot of that has to do with, in education, we call it scaffolding. So we start with a really big idea. We break it down into small steps, into parts. Very early on, creating opportunities for there to be small wins and successes so students can kind of experience that whole process and start with something small and then build on it. And then over time, those become bigger and bigger projects and they start to grow. And, a 2-day project becomes a 4-day project. And then the next time we're going to try a 2-week project. And, hopefully by the time they're seniors, they're really thinking deeply around a big problem that they want to solve that's maybe going to take 6 months to accomplish.
Yeah. And you've been doing that for a very long time, just based on your own recording background.
Yeah. Not even just recording, but my whole career has always been about trying to start something big, figuring out where I can just have a small win that we can start to grow and build off of. Whether it was, we built a studio in that castle, for example, or even we started the recording program and moved it into Urban Grace Church, which is this huge facility. And over the course of a year and a half, we were able to raise over $100,000 with grant money to be able to build a big performance area and then a smaller performance area, a computer lab, a studio. And it's not all going to happen on day one. It's building that over time and starting with something small, getting people excited about it, and then growing, building off of what you're able to accomplish.
How would you encourage one of your students to have a big enough idea?
Well,
I think like when you start with this project management stuff, especially someone like me, I know I hold myself back.
Yeah.
Because I'm constantly thinking about the constraints and the realities of the situation.
Right.
And it's really hard for me to think big enough to actually grow beyond the next, what is feasible, basically.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, first of all, I think it's interesting. Most students that I've met, especially at this age, it's usually not a problem of thinking big enough. It's a problem of being able to break it down into something that can be accomplished. Their dreams are like insane. It's like, wow, that's great. Maybe we'll get there,
Their dreams haven't been crushed yet.
They haven't been crushed yet. They still think they're going to build a rocket ship, next Saturday. But no, I think it's just showing what's possible, like getting some of those small wins. If you can build this, think what else you could do. And so it's about accomplishing small things and then building on those so that the projects become bigger and bigger and it shows them what's possible. I think it's part of the challenge is that a lot of students haven't had that experience of being successful. And part of the empowerment of project-based learning is that they see that they can physically create something. When you finish a math test and you turn in a 40-question multiple choice math test, it doesn't feel like you've really accomplished anything.
That's for sure.
But if you've taken these skills that you've learned through the math and through the skills that you need and have employed those in a way to create or build something that actually is usable in your life that you're passionate about, you start to realize, wow, this is really, like, I can actually use this. This is great. I can now start to dream bigger of what else I can accomplish if I only had these skills.
Yeah. What have been some stories of, of course, we'll have to maintain privacy of specific students, and you can also deflect this question if you want to. But what are some specific stories about students that you have taught in the past who have overcome some really significant obstacles?
There's dozens and dozens of stories. The great thing about education is that over time, your mind just fills up with all these stories. You've just got, every student has the story. Every student in your class and what their story is, and then you see what they become, and it's this ongoing thing, and you just collect those. That's actually probably one of my favorite things about education. Yeah, there's lots of them. One student in particular, his family, he didn't come from an extremely poor background, but his family was not wealthy. They were lower middle class, really passionate about music, and he really wanted to be a producer. And so one day decided that he was never going to do it unless he forced himself into the situation. So he had a friend of his that said he could sleep on their family's couch for 6 weeks. And he moved down to Los Angeles and got an internship at a studio through another connection that he had made.
This is after school.
This is after school, yeah. This is after, I think he was 21 at the time. So he moved down there, started working, and he literally was working at night as a stalker at Office Depot, and then during the day at the studio. So he would go from the studio to Office Depot. He would sleep or change in his car, sleep in his car for an hour, and then work both shifts. Did that for 6 months. Eventually, got to the point where they brought him on staff and hired him. And then he started working with bigger and bigger artists. And he, when he told the story, he was he would take any gig he could. He didn't care who it was. He would be in the studio with them all night long if that's what they wanted. And he started working with people like CeeLo and Skrillex and Flo Rida and all these bigger R&B and rap artists. And years later, as he was continuing his own career, some of those artists started to call him and say, could you come on tour with us and actually be my private engineer? And now he's flying around the world with Skrillex, working with him as his personal engineer on projects. And I think he even recorded Justin Bieber a year ago or 6 months ago. And it all started with him just taking that incredibly brave step of, I have no plans. I have a couch for 6 weeks with my name on it, and I'm just going to go make it happen and then figure out how to stay afloat.
That's insane.
So that's probably the most extreme story, but there's dozens of stories too of students that just were able to graduate high school, were able to accomplish something small and find, a path for them to be a part of a community and part of a contributing member of society, as people say. They found a path in when otherwise they might not have had an opportunity.
Are there any stories that break your heart?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, that's probably one of the more challenging things in education is that you're never 100% successful. You try so hard to get every student across the line. And, between the three schools, we have, between a 98 and 100% graduation rate. But every year there's always one or two kids that no matter how hard we try, whatever extenuating circumstances, it's just, at the end of the day, it doesn't work.
Is there one specific that just is your why?
Of a heartbreaking story?
Yeah, heartbreaking or even a win. I know when I'm teaching music or doing any sort of marketing consulting, I have a why. I have that one core story that I not cling to, but it is the prick that gets me going.
Yeah. I don't know if I have one story that's more like I said, a dozen or so stories.
A volume of stories.
Yeah, of people that have amazing success stories and then frustrating failures to a certain extent. I mean, not that they're failures, but just that we weren't successful in getting them across the finish line or at least right away. And then there's always students that, it didn't work in high school. And then, we find out 5-6 years later that they've eventually figured it out. And I've actually gotten letters from students at 25 and 26 years old writing me and saying I was such a jerk in high school. I'm so sorry that I, didn't get it, but I finally figured it out now. And I realized if I'd done what you had just, what you guys were trying to help me do, then it would have been so much easier.
I really admire everything that you guys are doing. I'm really proud to know you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's like I said, it's a huge team effort. It's about putting together a really amazing group of people and having each other's back and figuring out how we can accomplish something, as a team.
Yeah. What's a team meeting like with you guys?
So we've been meeting now. We've had everybody hired for about a month now. We've been mostly project brainstorming. And I mean, it's really funny because it's just like teaching. It just is a higher level up. So you sort of scaffold everything up just like you would. So you kind of, at first, when we meet as a team, it's really structured time. The first times we first started to meet them, this is how we're going to break these things down. This is what we want to accomplish. Here's sort of the goal. Let's figure out how we can brainstorm that. And then as we started to develop some of those, we realized, well, some of these teachers that have never taught before, they need a lot more specific direction as far as how this is going to work and how we're going to lay this out. So we had to provide more resources to show this is what it looks like. Now let's just do this one small step together and then let's build on that. And really it's just modeling that for our staff, our core team, which is myself, Melissa, and Jaleesa. The three of us are kind of the core team founding members. Modeling that for the rest of the staff so that they can see, oh, that's what I do with my students. I do the same thing you guys did with me, with my students. And so over the course of the summer, we're working together, and it's been really inspiring to see just some of the great ideas and some of the interests and passions of our staff. And
that's really great. Well, I am so grateful that you joined us today.
Yeah, of course.
And I know you have a ton of things you have to do because you're starting a freaking high school.
Yeah.
And everyone, like, school starts in a couple weeks. I know it's like more than a couple weeks, but it probably feels like a couple.
It definitely feels like a couple weeks for sure.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be great.
Okay, so beyond the Bare Naked Bravery adult coloring book, which is always free, your brave takeaway from today's show is to take 5 to 10 minutes this week breaking down a big project or idea you have. Try turning that project into 5 steps or chunks, and then break each of those chunks into 5 more chunks. And then continue this until you've made that huge task seem as simple as possible. And bonus challenge, if you're a fan of the Getting Things Done productivity philosophy, which is a pretty cool productivity book, then I encourage you to break this big idea into steps as small as 2-minute actions. That's the show this week. We'd love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can find Zach Varnell and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. Go ahead and tag us so we can cheer you on and see what you're up to these days. And again, we've put all the links in the show notes for today's episode, so be sure to visit us online for all that. Just visit barenakedbravery.com. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it for you, then please give us a review and rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone. It helps us out a lot more than it is a hassle for you. It takes like 2 seconds. All this bravery of Zach's and everyone else we interview, it deserves to be spread as far and as wide as possible, and you are a big part of that. So thank you ahead of time. If you haven't downloaded the Bare Naked Bravery adult coloring book yet, it's so cool. You need to check it out. It features designs from talented visual artists from all kinds, from all over the world. And this means that you can make art from a fellow Bare Naked Bravery listener. You can make that art come to life while you listen to the show, which is, I just think that's a super cool thing. Maybe it's just me, but I think it's awesome. We would all love for you to post your favorite finished pages on Instagram, and that way we can see what you're up to. Download the whole thing for free or purchase the paperback version by visiting barenakedbravery.com/color. Not only that, but everyone involved in making the coloring book wants you to vote for your 4 favorite Brave charities to receive the proceeds from the coloring book, which is so generous. Again, just visit barenakedbravery.com/color for more information. If you're digging the music in today's episode, that's because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing. They're so great. A premier music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. So to find out more about all the artists and musicians and other sponsors of the show, and to find out how to become a sponsor, visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm looking forward to being with you next week because we have so many cool things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.